Dear students, welcome back. Now, today we are going to cover another paper which is there in your second year course. This SEC2 or we call it AEEC, that is Translation Studies and Principles of Translation. So I was preparing for many days to present this particular topic. So let's start. Now, first of all, you must know the definition of translation. Translation is made up of a Latin word, translatio, which, if you go back, is made up of two words. One is trans and another is latio, right? So trans means across, trans, and ferry means to carry. So translatio, which comes from trans means across, and plus ferry means to carry, okay, or to bring. And latio, which comes from latus, which is the past participle of ferry. So this is the etymological, or you can say the meaning of this word translation. So translation word comes from the Latin word translatio, which is made up of two root words. The root words are trans means across, and ferry means to carry or to bring. So latio, now you'll be confused, ये latio कहाँ से आ गया? तो latio, it comes from latus. Latus क्या है? That is the past participle of ferry. तो ferry का जो third form है verb, वो है latus, right? और उसी latus से बना है latio. So translatio, trans का मतलब across, across का मतलब किसी के पार, okay? Ferry, m plus ferry means to carry or to bring. और जो ferry है वो है the past participle of ferry is latus, and latus से आया latio, right? So thus translation means carrying across. Carrying across, what you are carrying across? आप एक जगह से दूसरी जगह कुछ चीज़ ले जा रहे, क्या है वो? It is from one language to another, so you can understand in that way. So translation is a process of carrying meaning from one language to another. So it is a bringing across. Okay, so I hope you understood the meaning of translation. Translation made up of two words, trans plus latio. Latio comes from latus, which is a third form or the past participle of ferry, which means to carry, and trans means across. So to carry across, लेके जाना इधर से उधर, क्या लेके जाना? The meaning or the text from one language to another. So this is how you can define translation. Now actually this translation is going on even if you are not using two different languages. Still, when you are communicating with some other person, what do we communicate? We communicate any idea, thought or feeling. Every day we are doing that. तो आप क्या करते हैं? उस particular idea, उस thought को, उस feeling को आप translate करते हो. How? You translate it into words or non-verbal signals. आप चेहरे पे गुस्सा लाते हैं, या फिर गुस्सा आपको दिखाना है किसी को, और फ्रस्ट्रेशन दिखानी है, वो भी चेहरे पे दिख जाती है. सो दैट इज हाउ यू आर कैरिंग अक्रॉस योर फीलिंग टू द अदर पर्सन, राइट? सो in this sense you can say that you translate every day, but here in this translation studies, actually specifically we are talking of two different languages, right? So let us move ahead. This is a communication process. Here sender has some idea, वो क्या करेगा? उसको encode करेगा. Encode means he is now putting it into words or signal. कोई words में डालेगा, चाहे वो बोलेगा या लिखेगा, या कुछ सिग्नल हाथ से करेगा या चेहरे पे इमोशंस, वो मैसेज बन जाएगा. मैसेज विल गो टू द रिसीवर, ही विल decode it. Okay, then he will understand it and provide feedback. So this is going on daily basis. You are doing this. Now, let us go into the history of translation. Now, as language is spoken by human beings, and human beings, ever since they have born, there has been some kind of language. So translation also is a part of language, and translation is as old as human civilization. जिस दिन से इंसानी सभ्यता शुरू हुई, उसी दिन से ट्रांसलेशन का प्रोसेस भी शुरू हो गया. Since the dawn of civilization, that is, since the very ancient times, we have been using language to translate our thoughts and ideas. Okay, or if you go back to the history of translation, so it dates back to the 3rd millennium BC, right? And the Babylon of Hammurabi's day, that is 2100 BC, was a polyglot city. Polyglot means different languages were spoken in the same city, right? And much of the official business of the empire was made possible by writers who translated edicts into various languages. So you can understand how this ancient city had different languages spoken across different parts of the same city. So that's why those translators were employed, so that the business or the affairs of that city could be carried out. And with the evolution of human society, now, especially in today's world where the international boundaries have shrunk because of a tremendous growth in communication technology, we have gone very closer to each other now. So people living in distant places, you can understand their feelings and thoughts. And how we translate or how we understand those feelings or thought is through symbols and codes, right? So that is how we understand the different language in our own language. So now, since beginning, since ancient times, people, they speak different languages. Even in India, if you talk about, we have a large number of languages, dialects. Every few kilometers there's a change of language, right? If not very significant, but still there are changes within a district, within a state. Within states, we have many languages which are identified by our constitution, and many dialects which still survive in India. So, when people interact with each other, so they need to understand each other's language, and that is why translation becomes important, right? So this is that example from some of the most ancient times. Today we live in a global world, so translation has become more important. We will understand in the later slides what is the importance of translation, what are the areas, what are the fields. So the activity of translation has a long-standing tradition and has been widely practiced throughout history. But today, especially in this rapidly changing world, its role has become very much important, right? So nowadays there are a lot of exchanges, cultural exchanges, knowledge exchanges. There's widening of horizon. People, they are traveling to far off places. The international business and communication is expanding. So in such a scenario, translation has become very important. Be it for any purpose, we will also go through what are the purposes for which translation is used. So there may be scientific, medical, technological, commercial, legal, or other purposes for human communication. So today we rely heavily on translation. So, and its field is ever growing in today's scenario. So how, how we use translation in our different spheres of our life. So first is translation in art and literature. Art and literature. So in literature and art, suppose you want to read a novel which is written by some South Korean novelist, or in some other language, Spanish, or be it French. So it is possible for us, because translation of literary works, that is poems, plays, novels, so you can access and appreciate this literature from different cultures and languages. So uh, once you go through those poems, plays, or novels, or different literary works, then you understand their culture. So there is a cross cultural dialogue, and it enriches the literary landscape. Second is in arts, there is translation of art exhibitions, performances, and films. Today you can watch South Korean films or Japanese films which are available in your own language. So the audience can engage with a lot of artistic expressions, and they get to know of different perspectives, different cultures. So this is the first use of translation, that is in art and literature, right? Then second is education and academia. Okay, education and academia. Now you know that in today's fast expanding world, translation of academic papers, research articles, textbooks, now that gives you access to you know scholarly knowledge across the global. So you can access academic papers, research articles, or textbooks which are written in different languages because of translation, and that is how you can collaborate, exchange ideas, and there is advancement of knowledge in different fields of study, right? Then translation of educational materials in curriculum enables students to learn subjects in their native language. So there is promotion of literacy and educational and attainment. So these are first two spheres of life in which we use translation. First is literature and art, and second is education and academia. Next is business and commerce. So now we live in a globalized world where, because of fast growth in the means of transportation and communication, today the foreign companies, multinational companies, they are setting up their business in distant lands, and they are not only earning profit, but they are thriving and growing every day. So translation in business and commerce becomes very important, because suppose a Japanese company wants to set up its business in India, so it needs to have translation of various business documents, contracts, agreements, so that it can facilitate international trade and commerce by enabling communication between business and clients from different linguistic backgrounds, right? And also translations of marketing materials, advertisements, and product descriptions. Now suppose there is a Japanese company which is making a mobile phone in India. So now if they print their material in Japanese, then may the Indians or the Indian consumers will not be able to understand. So they need translation to they put advertisements in, and in the TV or newspapers, and they also provide to you with that product guide and all. So it should be easily accessible to the customers and in their own language, right? So that is where this translation becomes important, because if you want to be competitive globally, then you have to engage with diverse consumer markets and their demands and the language they understand, right? So these are the first three spheres of life in which we use translation. First is art and literature, Second is education and academia. Third is business and commerce. And next is media and journalism. So now, in this fast expanding world, today you can watch news on TV, which is aired by New York City, or which are available to you from Paris or France. So those news articles, reports, broadcasts, they are available to you in your own language. Because of translation, you come to know about various global events and developments regardless of the language barriers. So language is not a barrier today because of this translation. Then translation of books. In journalism, you require a lot of information in the form of books. You need to access those books which are available in different languages, articles, documentaries. So that again adds to the cross-cultural understanding and awareness of the socio-political environment around the globe, around the world. So this is how translation is useful in media and journalism. Next is this is media and journalism. Next is legal and government. Legal. Now, different countries have their own legal proceedings, legal framework. They have different laws, regulations. So now, since suppose I am living in America, or I'm living in Spain, or I want to do business in some other country, so I need translation of those laws to understand those laws, regulations, or legal documents, so that I get access to legal information and services in my own language, so that I can have access to equal justice, right? So here also translation is of paramount importance. Next is now government. There are a lot of treaties, diplomatic agreements, and official communications between the various governments. Governments also are transacting a lot of business, like India has some treaty with Japan, then France. So these diplomatic agreements, Russia also. So you might have seen when Russian this representative, government representative comes to India. So though he speaks in his native language, so there is a translator, who translates that language into the target language, so that both the parties can understand well. Then only there will be diplomatic agreements और treaties एंड ऑफिशियल कम्युनिकेशन ऑल्सो. नहीं तो ऐसा होगा वो रशियन बोल के जाएगा और हमारे वाला जो है वो हिंदी बोल के जाएगा, दोनों की समझ में कुछ नहीं आएगा. तो will there be a diplomatic agreement? No, there won't be. So here also translation comes to our rescue. Next is, and the last sphere of our daily life is where we use translation, is healthcare and medicine. Healthcare and medicine. Now, there have been a lot of research across the globe in various medical fields. So if that information remains, locked up in that language only, then the other world will not have access to it. So translation of medical literature, patient information leaflets, then pharmaceutical labels, that help healthcare professionals communicate effectively with patients from diverse linguistic backgrounds, right? Then translations of medical research, clinical trials, which have already been going on in some part of the world. So if they are available to you in the translated form, so you need to go further. You need not go again and research the same thing. So that is how there is growth in medical science, the advancement, because already someone has researched something and now you need to go further, so that you can add on something else to the knowledge. So in all these spheres, translation serves as a bridge which connects people, cultures, and which helps in sharing of knowledge across linguistic and cultural boundaries, right? So that, and which brings mutual understanding, cooperation, and progress in a diverse and global, or you call it interconnected world. So these are the uses to which, or these are the spheres of activity in which translation is important in our spheres of life. Let us take a quick recall. First is translation in art and literature, where a lot of books and literary works, plays, novels, they are translated. In art, the art exhibitions, performances, and films, they are translated into the target language so that you have access to that particular material. Next is education and academia. A lot of books, research papers, articles, they are available to you, and in translated version you can make use of them. So next is business and commerce. Again, here translation is of paramount importance, because through translation only, a company or a multinational company doing business in some other part of the world can, have access to the consumers, or can provide better service to their customers, right? Then next is media and journalism. This is how you can have access to the global events which are happening around the world. And next is legal and government. So if you are living in some other nation which has a different language, so in order to have equality, equal access to justice, so you need to understand the legal documents in your own language. And government, as far as government, all the transactions of the government, whether it is at a diplomatic level or it is at the government level, so like treaties or agreements or trade agreements, so they get finalized only when these different set of people, they understand each other's language through translation. Then next is healthcare and medicine. We just discussed how translation is useful in healthcare and medicine. Okay, now these are the spheres. Now this is next question, if it is asked, then what is the importance of translation? So whatever we understood till now, that comes under importance also. So that is the importance, whatever we discussed, right, just now. So once I go through this, you will understand it is interconnected, and there is no need to worry about this. So translation plays an important role in facilitating communication. So the purpose of translation ultimately is communication, so that the two parties, the senders and the receiver, they can understand each other's language, okay, and they can communicate, right? So as we understood in the previous slide, so the translation, it fosters cultural exchange, knowledge advancement, and it helps bridge that linguistic and cultural boundaries. So what is the importance of translation in various aspects of human life? First is global communication, that we understood in previous slides, media and journalism. So global communication, translation allows people from different linguistic backgrounds to communicate and interact with each other. So this way you are breaking down those language barriers, and you are enabling cross-cultural dialogue. So it is facilitating international diplomacy, trade, tourism, and collaboration in various fields. So that is why we are talking of this thing, global communication, where people, they exchange their thoughts, feelings through commonly understood language. Then cultural exchange, this is related to art and culture. So translation not only preserves and disseminates cultural heritage, literature and art from diverse linguistic and cultural traditions, it enables people to access and appreciate works of literature. So these are the first 2 points, art and literature, and education and academia. So once you get to know other people through their literature, through the art form like films, music, and art, So then you understand them better, and this way there is a stronger cross cultural understanding and appreciation, right? The next is education and research. So translation makes education, knowledge and information accessible today. You can online you have got a lot of database and a lot of research papers, articles, textbooks. They are available in plenty in your own language. So there is a promotion of exchange of ideas and advancement in further advancement in science technology, right? Next is literary enrichment. Now uh, translation enriches the literary landscape because you get to know about the literature from different culture and languages, and you can read different literary works like poems, plays, novels. uh, so it again promotes cultural diversity and literary appreciation. So these are nothing but the same points that we discussed previously. So business and commerce again, that we have already discussed. Then legal and diplomatic relations. So business and commerce, translation facilitates international trade and commerce by enabling communication between businesses, clients and consumers at different linguistic backgrounds, so that they can expand their markets reach, and they can make global partnerships, right? Next is legal and diplomatic relations. This already we have discussed in spheres of translation. So it is legal translation where you get equal access to justice and legal rights by translating laws, contracts and legal documents into different languages. So it also plays a crucial role in diplomacy as far as government or diplomatic relations are concerned. So by which these different governments can have communication. Okay, in different international organizations also. Then healthcare and social services. This we already covered. How translation in healthcare ensures that patients get accurate information and access to medical services in their native language. And then media and information access. Then translation allows people to stay informed about global events, news and developments. So in summary, you can say that translation is essential for communication, for preserving cultural diversity, promoting mutual understanding, and uh, advancing progress and cooperation in a globalized world. So ये जो पॉइंट्स थे ये बिल्कुल यही थे जो हमने इससे पहले यहाँ पे डिस्कस किए थे. If you understand these slides, then you can understand the importance of translation also. Okay, translation in art and literature, education and academia, business and commerce, media and journalism, legal and government, and healthcare and medicine. The same thing goes here also. It is helpful or important in global communication. Then cultural exchange, these two are added. Then education and research, literary enrichment, business and commerce, legal and diplomatic relations, healthcare and social services, and media and information access. So you can summarize it like that. Okay, now next part of this is different areas of translation. तो एरिया भी वही है भाई, जहाँ लिटरेरी है, जहाँ वो लिटरेरी हो गया एरिया, स्फीयर से रिलेटेड है सारी चीज़ें, इंपॉर्टेंस भी वहीं से निकली. अब एरिया ऑफ ट्रांसलेशन भी वही है. अगर आप किसी नॉवेल को, लिटरेरी किसी आइटम को, जॉनर को आप ट्रांसलेट कर रहे हैं तो लिटरेरी ट्रांसलेशन होगी. वो पोइट्री है, ड्रामा है, नॉवेल है, फिक्शन है. सो यू अंडरस्टैंड डिफरेंट लिटरेरी टेक्निक्स, कल्चरल कॉन्टेक्स्ट, और जो ऑथर का स्टाइल, वॉइस एंड थीम accurately in the target language, so that becomes literary translation. Next is legal translation. Again you go back to those slides. Wow, legal translation किस लिए चाहिए? To have access to legal documents, court transcripts or legal texts. So they are available to in the target language. Then medical translation. Again medical record, patient information, pharmaceutical documents, medical terminology, anatomy, ये सारी चीज़ें they are available in the form of medical translation. Then technical translation, like technical documents, manuals, specifications, engineering reports and all. So that becomes technical translation. Business translation, which involves translating business documents, financial reports, marketing material. So that becomes business translation. Then website and software localization. So website and software localization involve translating website content using interfaces and software applications into different languages. Suppose a company is running its office in India, it is a Japanese company, so maybe it uses the Indian languages, right? Then audio visual translation. Audio visual translation involves translating subtitles, dubbing scripts, and video overs, and other audio visual content, right? So this is how. Then next is interpreting. Interpreting means orally translating spoken language in real time during meetings, conferences, and events. You might have seen some foreign delegates, visiting India, and once they communicate, they speak their own language. Suppose a Russian prime minister is visiting here, he speaks Russian, so there will be an interpreter. The business of interpreter is to translate orally the spoken language in the real time. So, like if he says, "Hello, how are you?" in Russian, so he will translate into Hindi. He will say that, "आप कैसे हैं?" right, in the real time. So इसके लिए there is a lot of practice which is required. The interpreters, they have to first understand and then translate exactly the same thing into the target language. Okay, so that is called interpreting, right? Next is scientific and academic translation, which involves translating research papers, academic articles, conference presentations, and scholarly text. Okay, and last one is government and diplomatic translation. Though this is something, again, if you go back to this one, you remember only this one, and you will answer all the three questions. First, if it is asked, describe how translation is important in different spheres of life, so you can answer like this. Okay, and if it is asked another question, what is the importance of translation, again you go back to the same thing for global communication, for culture, education, and research. Same points here, business and commerce. And different areas of translation, again something related to the first one, then literary, legal, medical, technical, business. So these are all different kinds of translation. Now next question is whether translation is a science or art. This may be asked sometimes. So you have to tell whether translation is science or it is an art, right? So let us see translation as art or science. So this debate over whether translation is more of an art or science is a long-standing one, and the answer depends upon the perspective and context from which it is viewed. So no viewpoint is final. You cannot categorically say that this translation is an art. Similarly, you cannot say that it is a science, right? So let us see how we can view it both as art, an art, and a science. So let's first discuss how translation is an art. So art means, you understand, art means creativity, and art is something where you express something, and art also means interpretation, and art also means some aesthetic consideration. Aesthetic means certain understanding the beauty of the thing. So if you find these qualities in translation, then we will label it as art. So first thing is creativity. So translation requires creativity. Why does it require creativity? because in order to capture the style, tone, and the complexities of the original work, okay, you require some kind of creativity, right? So that you can translate the same thing to the target audience. So translation, you can say, is a thing which requires creativity to capture the style, tone, and complexities of the original work, so that you can uh, you know uh, translate it exactly in the same manner to the target audience or in the target language. So it requires creativity on the part of the translator. Second thing is expressiveness. Now translators must use language in a way that conveys the emotions, imagery, and cultural context of the source text, right? Often requiring subjective judgment and interpretation. Now, translation is not just translating word for words. You are actually conveying some kind of emotions or imagery and cultural context from the source text to the target text, right? So for that, you need to understand those emotions and you need to express those emotions in the target language, right? So this way you can say that translation requires expressiveness, where you are expressing those emotions, those images, that cultural context from the source text to the target text. Next is interpretation. Now, translating literature, especially poetry or some other creative work, that involves interpreting the author's intentions. Actually, you are doing the job of an interpreter, right? So you need to understand first the author's intentions, and then you convey those intentions in a way, in a manner that brings out a similar response in the target audience. Suppose now, we'll take an example here. Suppose there is a character, you are reading a play which is written in Spanish and you are translating it into English or Hindi. Now, suppose the character, he is in a dilemma and is quite frustrated. So the translator first needs to understand author's intention, that why the author has put that particular character in that particular kind of situation. And then then the translator's job is to translate uh, the source text into the target text to evoke a similar kind of response in the target audience. So the target audience should also see that kind of frustration in the mind of that character. The translation should not change that intention or that emotion, right? So that is why it is also called interpretation. Then next is aesthetic considerations. So literary translation in particular, when we are translating literature, so it involves aesthetic considerations, such as when you are translating especially poetry in poetic language. So it has elements, aesthetic elements, which make it lovely to the ear or the eye. That is rhythm, metaphor, and wordplay. So the translator needs to maintain a balance, okay, when he is translating from the source language to the target language. So in this way you can say that translation is a kind of art which requires creativity, expressiveness, interpretation, and also which takes into account the aesthetic considerations of the source text. So you can say that uh, translation is an art. But now we will take up how we can understand, how we can level this translation as a science, right? So science, as you understood art means something creative, something where you express your emotions, feelings, and you also interpret, and you also try to bring out those beautiful elements of beauty in the text, right? And translation, the science, on the other hand, follows a logical approach. It is more systematic and it follows certain principles. जैसे साइंस में ये अगर फार्मूला है एफ इज इक्वल टू एम ए, तो वो हमेशा वही रहेगा, एफ इज इक्वल टू एम ए, द फोर्स इज डायरेक्टली प्रोपोर्शनल टू द एक्सेलरेशन, right? So and science is more based on research and analysis, and it uses certain technology and tools, right? So again, if we are able to prove that translation uses all these things, then it can be called as a science also. So first thing is systematic approach. So translation follows certain systematic principles and methodologies based on linguistic, cultural, and textual analysis. So you can say then it is more similar to a scientific process, क्योंकि साइंस जो है ये सारे फॉलो करती है सिस्टमेटिक प्रिंसिपल्स, कुछ मेथड्स, और जो बेस्ड होते हैं लिंग्विस्टिक, कल्चर और टेक्सचुअल एनालिसिस के ऊपर. सो यू कैन से दैट translation follows a systematic approach similar to the scientific process, right? Second is rules and constraints. So translators also have to adhere to certain grammatical rules, linguistic conventions, and cultural norms. तो ऐसा नहीं है कि आपका जो ट्रांसलेटर है वो अपनी मर्जी से कुछ भी लिख सकता है, कुछ भी कर सकता है. तो he has to follow certain grammatical rules, linguistic conventions और कल्चरल नॉर्म्स, जो एक लैंग्वेज में और दूसरी लैंग्वेज में अलग अलग नॉर्म्स हैं, उनको भी फॉलो करना पड़ेगा. तो इस तरह से वी कैन से दैट it is more scientific in its approach, because a translator requires a scientific understanding of the language structures and patterns. अब structure की बात करेंगे आप तो जैसे इंग्लिश में आप लिखते हैं सब्जेक्ट पहला आता है, जैसे राम गोज़ टू कॉलेज, राम गोज़ टू कॉलेज. तो पहले सब्जेक्ट आया, फिर आपका वर्ब आया, फिर ऑब्जेक्ट आया. तो SVO ये स्ट्रक्चर है इसका. इसी को अगर हम हिंदी में बोलेंगे तो वो चेंज हो जाता है, राम स्कूल जाता है. यहाँ पे राम सब्जेक्ट, फिर ऑब्जेक्ट और फिर वर्ब, राइट? SOV, अ डिफरेंट पैटर्न, अ डिफरेंट स्ट्रक्चर. ठीक है, तो अगर आप वर्ड टू वर्ड ट्रांसलेट करेंगे तो फिर वो क्या हो जाएगा, वो गड़बड़ हो जाएगा. ठीक है, तो आप क्या बोलेंगे, राम गोज़ टू स्कूल को आप क्या बोलेंगे हिंदी में, राम जाता है स्कूल. So this is the difference. So translator has to understand the grammatical rules and the language structures and patterns. Similarly, third point is research and analysis. Translator जो science जैसे research और analysis पे base होती है, उसी तरह से जो translators, they also conduct research to understand the subject matter, terminology, and cultural references in the source text. So they apply their analytical skills, okay, to ensure accuracy and consistency in the translation. तो एक scientific researcher की तरह जो translators हैं वो भी research करते हैं, समझते हैं उस मैटर को, टर्मिनोलॉजी को और कल्चरल रेफरेंसेस को सोर्स टेक्स्ट में, फिर उनको अपनी जो एनालिटिकल स्किल्स हैं उनको यूज़ करके फिर ट्रांसलेट करते हैं टारगेट टेक्स्ट में, राइट? देन लास्ट इज टेक्नोलॉजी एंड टूल्स. सो science uses some certain technology and tools. So translation also uses certain tools like software and resources, and so it gives a scientific aspect to the translation. तो एक तरह के systematic analysis और terminology management and quality assurance, so all these things are followed in translation. एक systematic analysis होती है, terminology management होती है और quality assurance होती है. So in this way, keeping in view these points, you can say that translation can also be called a science, right? So as I told you, in reality translation has both elements of both art and science. So because it blends creativity and expressiveness with systematic analysis and adherence to rules. तो art भी है और science भी है. आर्ट कैसे है, क्योंकि ये क्रिएटिविटी और एक्सप्रेसिवनेस को यूज़ करती है और उसको जोड़ती है किसके साथ, सिस्टमेटिक एनालिसिस और adherence to rules or principles. So translators must draw on their linguistic proficiency, cultural knowledge, and critical thinking abilities to navigate the complexities of translation and produce high quality, effective translation that resonate with their intended audience. So the role of translator is not very passive, it is a very active role. He has sometimes has to be creative and expressive, and at times he has to be systematic uh, in his approach. Then only you can create the same impression, you can carry the message from one language to another in the same manner as was intended in the source language. Then only you can prove worthy translator. So ultimately, whether science translation is viewed as more of an art or a science depends on the balance between subjective interpretation and objective analysis in the translation process. तो ये डिपेंड करता है कि हम आर्ट साइंस ट्रांसलेशन को आर्ट बोलें या साइंस बोलें, और किस तरह से बैलेंस बनाया है ट्रांसलेटर ने, किस तरह से उसने अपनी क्रिएटिविटी और एक्सप्रेसिवनेस को एक ऑब्जेक्टिव एनालिसिस जो साइंटिफिक अप्रोच है उसके साथ बैलेंस किया है. सो दिस इज़ हाउ यू कैन आंसर द क्वेश्चन दैट ट्रांसलेशन इज़ art or science, right? So we discussed just a quick recall, translation as science or art. The translation, we can view it as an art also because it requires creativity, expressiveness, interpretation, and we also consider the aesthetic considerations of a particular work, right? So that makes it an art. On the other hand, it follows a systematic approach, follows certain rules and constraints, uses research and analysis as a tool, and it makes use of certain technology, translation software, and certain tools and other resources. So in this way, finally we can conclude that translation is both an art as well as science, right? Because it blends, it mixes creativity and expressiveness with systematic analysis and adherence to rules, right? So now we'll quickly go through the history of translation. Now, history of translation, as we discussed in the first slide, that history of translation is as old as the human civilization itself, right? So now we'll discuss brief history of translation in the East and the West, right? So the history of translation in both the East and West is very extensive, very large, and very complex. So spanning thousands of years and influenced by cultural, linguistic, religious, and various technological developments. But we will have a brief overview of the history of translation in each region. We will start with the East. Now, if you talk about the ancient civilizations in the East, East means the countries like China, India, these countries of Asia. So that is the East. So if you talk about ancient civilizations, then translation has been practiced in various forms in ancient Eastern civilizations such as China, India, and Mesopotamia. So these three names you must remember when you talk about ancient civilizations and the translations. So these cultures, China, India, China, and Mesopotamia, these cultures developed early translation techniques. Earliest, they were the first ones to use translation. So they translated religious text, legal documents, and literary works. So this is ancient civilization. Next is Buddhist scriptures. So one of the earliest and most significant translation effort in the East was the translation of Buddhist scriptures from Sanskrit into Chinese by the Chinese. Okay, so the Buddhist scriptures, which were available in our own language, that is Sanskrit, they were translated into Chinese, and this was done in around 2nd century CE. and it continued for several centuries, okay, resulting in the creation of thousands of Buddhist texts in Chinese. So this was a very extensive translation work which was carried out, and this is how they translated Sanskrit into Chinese. Now next was classical Chinese literature. So translation played a crucial role in dissemination of classical Chinese literature to neighboring countries such as Japan and Korea. Now you know that China, that they got a lot of knowledge through these Buddhist translations. Buddhist scriptures were translated into Chinese. Now again, the Chinese classical literature was further translated into Japanese and Korean by their neighboring countries. So Chinese literature became a kind of source for them. So Chinese literary work, including poetry, prose, and philosophical texts, were translated into Japanese and Korean, influencing the development of literature and culture in these regions. That is how they were influenced by the Chinese culture. Next is Islamic scholarship. So in the Islamic world, translation flourished during the Abbasid Caliphate, that is 8th to 13th century. Arab scholars translated works from Greek, Persian, Indian and other languages into Arabic. तो इस्लामिक स्कॉलरशिप के बारे में जब आप बात करेंगे तो जो अरब स्कॉलर्स थे उन्होंने ग्रीक, पर्शियन, इंडियन और दूसरी लैंग्वेजेस को अरेबिक में ट्रांसलेट किया, एंड दे आल्सो कंट्रीब्यूटेड टू preservation and transmission of knowledge in the field philosophy, science, medicine and literature. तो इन fields में उन्होंने knowledge को इन सारी languages से translate किया, Greek, Persian, Indian and some other languages, and in the field of philosophy, religion, science, medicine and literature. So this is brief history of translation in the East. A quick recall. Ancient civilization की जब आप बात करेंगे तो some of the ancient the Eastern civilization such as India, China and Mesopotamia, these cultures they developed early translation techniques. उन्होंने सबसे पहले किया और क्या ट्रांसलेट किया? religious text, legal documents and literary works. उसके बाद सबसे बड़ी जो extensive translation की गई that was from Sanskrit into Chinese, और किस चीज़ की ट्रांसलेशन हुई? बुद्धिस्ट स्क्रिप्चर्स की. उसके बाद नेक्स्ट जो इम्पोर्टेंट ट्रांसलेशन फेज था दैट वाज फ्रॉम क्लासिकल चाइनीज लिटरेचर. दिस वाज ट्रांसलेटेड इनटू द नेबरिंग कंट्रीज लैंग्वेजेस लाइक द जापानीज एंड द कोरियंस. एंड इफ यू टॉक अबाउट द इस्लामिक स्कॉलरशिप, तो जो अरब स्कॉलर्स थे दे ट्रांसलेटेड a lot of works from Greek, Persian, Indian and other languages into Arabic in the field of philosophy, science, medicine and literature. So this is one of the greatest translation which was done, ancient Indian and Buddhist translations. Then we talk about translation in the West. West की बात करते हैं हम, Europe and these neighboring countries. Then सबसे जो ancient जो civilization थी वो थी Greece और Rome. So ancient Greece and Rome, translation has roots in ancient Greek and Roman civilizations where scholars translated text from various languages into Greek and Latin. तो बहुत सारे scholars ने जो Romans और Latin थे, Romans and Greek थे, उन्होंने इसको translate किया उनकी languages में, Greek और Latin में. And कौन से works थे वो? Literature, philosophy, science and religion. So they laid the foundation of Western intellectual thought. So at the core of it, Western literary thought or intellectual thought comes Greece and Rome. फिर अगर आप medieval Europe की बात करते हैं, during the Middle Ages, translation played a vital role in the transmission of knowledge in Europe. Europe में फिर ये translation हुआ. Then monastic scribes translated religious text, classical works and scientific treatises from Latin into the vernacular languages so that they were available to the wider audience. तो सबसे जो स्टोर हाउस था नॉलेज का या हर तरह की लिटरेचर का, वो ग्रीस एंड रोम थे. वहाँ से फिर ये मिडिएवल यूरोप में, मिडल एजेस में, वो वर्निकुलर लैंग्वेजेस में उनकी जो लोकल लैंग्वेजेस थी उनमें ट्रांसलेट हुआ है क्लासिकल वर्क्स, रिलीजियस टेक्स्ट एंड साइंटिफिक ट्रीटाइजेस और लैटिन से उनकी लैंग्वेज में. देन नेक्स्ट जो इम्पोर्टेंट फेज था दैट वाज रेनेसां, और जिसको दूसरा नाम ह्यूमनिज्म का भी दिया जाता है. तो रेनेसां पीरियड अगेन देयर वाज अ रिवाइवल ऑफ classical Greek and Latin literature. So there was a surge, again there was a surge in translation activities. और जो ह्यूमनिस्ट स्कॉलर्स थे वो ट्रांसलेट किया उन्होंने ग्रीक टेक्स्ट को, ग्रीक एंड टेक्स्ट इनटू लैटिन एंड देन वर्निकुलर लैंग्वेजेस. सो बहुत सारा क्लासिकल नॉलेज जो ग्रीस और रोम का था वो फिर से मॉडर्न यूरोपियन लैंग्वेजेस में आ गया. So this is the third phase. And the last and most important phase is the age of exploration. When you know that these European countries they became strong, especially this England. So during the 15th and 16th centuries, they made a lot of explorations around the world. Or because of those explorations, they found new countries, new nations, and because of their contact with the European other part of the world, there was obviously translation of various languages like Americas, Asia. A lot of languages from Asia and European languages, and vice versa. दोनों तरफ होने लगा फिर. एशिया और अमेरिका का इंग्लिश में यूरोपियन लैंग्वेजेस में और यूरोपियन का उनकी लैंग्वेजेस में. सो देयर वाज लॉट ऑफ क्रॉस कल्चरल एक्सचेंज एंड कॉलोनाइजेशन. और वही इसीलिए इंग्लिश भी इंडिया में आई हो, आपने देखा होगा. अंग्रेज यहाँ आए तो दे वांटेड टू सेट अप देयर रूल एंड दे first they came as traders when they found this country full of resources. So they settled as rulers. और जब rulers बन गए तो they needed to understand people's languages because they were to rule here. तो इस तरह से उन्होंने इंग्लिश को बढ़ावा दिया. then slowly they had certain a number of people who could easily understand both languages, English and Hindi, so that which was important for exchange of the thoughts and ideas. So this is the history of translation in the East and the West. We'll take a quick recap, okay, of translation in the West. Then first is ancient Greece and Rome. So they were the center because they were the centers of these literary works like philosophy, science and religion. So they laid the foundation of Western intellectual thought. Then फिर medieval Europe की बात करेंगे तो ये जो ग्रीक और रोमन जो नॉलेज था वो यूरोप में आया, where it was translated into Latin, from Latin into vernacular languages. और एक रेनेसां हुआ, that was a great period of revival of interest in classical Greek and Latin literature. तो फिर से एक बार ग्रीक और लैटिन जो क्लासिकल नॉलेज था वो यहाँ पे यूरोप में फैला. Then when we talk about age of exploration, when these Europeans they traveled to different parts of the world, they found contact with different nations. So obviously there was a translation of indigenous language into European and vice versa. Okay, this is the history of translation in the East and the West, right? So next we will take up approaches to translation in the next video. So I think this is enough.